Alright guys, welcome back. I'm excited to review a couple things with you guys as well as go over some new topics for today. Last videos we got a chance to talk about MVC patterns, we got a chance to talk about properties, data types and syntax, and we also even got a chance to talk about arrays very briefly at the end of the last video. Today I would like to talk about dictionaries and loops with you, in addition to taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the properties and arrays. So let's get into it. First things first, as our review, MVC patterns is what we're building up to. You are learning to program so that you can build an app. In order for your app to work, it's going to need to base its views off of these three principles, MVC. So we have, once again, a page, which is where you put your buttons and everything like that. And this is where you drag and drop inside of the assistant editor. And this is your view. Then you have the controller, which is the page of code that's directly communicating with the view. And then you have model. And this is how you model your data. And this could be a few pages itself. You can have multiple pages of your code here that's going to be organizing all of your data. So today, when we go over arrays and dictionaries, you're going to be learning a lot of key principles, key coding styles that you're going to end up using when you're putting together your data and you're organizing your items. So we talked about variables and constants last time. Variables are something that can change. Constants are kind of objects that can't be changed. We create these objects or these properties by calling var at the beginning or let. We give it a name and then we use the colon and we decide what type of data type it is we are actually using. Remember, when it comes to data types, well, we have a lot of different data types we can choose from, but the three that we've been focusing on is int, we have string, and we have Boolean, which is represented by true and false. Strings are a string of characters, and ints are actually numbers. So objects that we actually end up storing, these are actually just, this could be 1, 2, 3, you know, if it's an int, or a string could be, you know, whatever we want. It's basically words, just as a refresher. And then also a Boolean, if we were storing a Boolean, it would be true or false. Okay, now with that out of the way, assignment operators. I know in the very first video I had mentioned very briefly that we have assignment operators, the equal sign. There are more than just the equal sign for assignment operators that you could probably imagine. There are also comparison operators. Comparison operators are, of course, comparing two values to each other in order for you to do something else. So you have your double equal sign, you have not equal to, basically this is equal to, not equal to, or greater than, less than. So equal. Pretty simple. So we have our comparison operators and we're going to be using those. We're going to come back around to that either in this video or the next, but it's important for you to know that before we move on. So we talked about in the last video arrays, and let's kind of refresh on the arrays. Arrays look like this, where you are storing objects or data types together. You are using the brackets here to signify that this is an array. And inside of those brackets, you are separating your items by a comma. You're going to use a comma to separate your items. And then you can have an array of numbers. You can have an array of characters or strings. Sky's the limit. You can have an array for whatever you want. Dictionaries, however, go off of a key value pair. We're going to go over this in more detail in a minute, but the way that this works is you have your brackets, and it's basically treating this like an array. You can have an array of key value pairs by calling upon a comma. But what this is you have a key which could be anything. This could be a different data type than your value. So you can have a key that is an int value, and you can have that is an int data type, and you can have a string that is a you can have a value that is a string value type. You can have anything in here. It doesn't matter for your keys and values as long as they're consistent. So we'll go over the structure of this in a moment. So remember how in an array, if you have some array, you can access an element, an individual element in this array by calling a number. So if we said 1 next to the name of the array, we have the brackets and we write the number 1, then it is going to access this element, because arrays go off of, they start at an index of 0, and then 1, and then 2, and so on and so forth. Just as a refresher on that. Let's see what that looks like. So instead of what we had before here, we can do something like this. Now, I showed you an example of this. If we come out of here, go back and minimize myself. There we go. So definitely over here, we see an example of this. Although the only difference in my presentation is that I didn't put this here, where we explicitly say that this is an array of whatever. Just remember that this is a great practice to have. This would work just as well without it being there, but I recommend having that there, just so your code is a little bit more readable. So you can have an array of your objects. And an example I gave you the other day was actually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so on and so forth. It's a great example. Once again, just pointing out that an array starts at an index of 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to let you have a guess at this. What would we get back from the array if we put in a 1 here inside the brackets? We would get Tuesday. So why do we learn about arrays? Why are arrays so important? They're important because they store a lot of data. So you may have a friends list on Facebook. Guess how that's being stored? It's an array of friends. So you have this friend, this friend, this friend, this friend. And sometimes you may want to search through that list of friends. Or you may want to do certain things to certain friends, like maybe you want to block someone, maybe you want to make someone a best friend or something like that, make someone a favorite. Same thing with your contacts. That's why we learn loops. That way we can loop through something over and over again. So if we want to loop through a list and do something with each individual element, we need to use loops. So how do loops work? First off, we have 3 main loops. There's a few others out there. I just feel like these are a great start for you. And these are kind of the most common ones. We have an if statement, our if loop, we have a for loop, and then we also have a while loop. And you can pretty much guess how these work, especially if you remember any of your old science classes or anything like that. Nothing's changed. In the scientific method, we have an if statement. If this condition is true, then perform some task or do something. Else, you'll do something else. This is super duper basic, and it works exactly the same in code. And literally the way that I wrote it right here, this would work in code. So let's go over to code real quick and check this out. So if I were to say, if name is equal to Harold, and teach you something new. If you ever want to test something out, you want to print something out into the console. The console is this big space down here below at the bottom of the screen. This is how we normally test code or test to make sure something is working. It's important to know the print statement. You're going to use it a lot. So there's no better time to learn it than now. Print is something that is given to us by Apple and allows us to type the word print, and inside of these parentheses we can actually put a string, and it will actually print that string out in the console, which is down below here, as you'll see. So inside of our if statement, if name is equal to Harold, then we are going to print hi. Okay, and as you can see down below, we get hi Harold. So if it's not, then we can hit the return key or enter, and we can type else. And inside of our brackets here, we can print who are you? Okay, so if I want this to, as you can see down below, it's never hitting our second print statement, because as of right now, name is always going to be equal to Harold. But what if we change that name? What if we say name equals Luis? Okay, so now that we've changed it, and it's arguing at us. So remember, variables and constants. It's telling us right now that name is actually a constant. So if we go up here to our code, we can change this to a var, and it should work just fine. There we go. And now in the console, it's printing out, who are you? Pretty simple. So this is how we write if statements. So just remember that you need to make sure that whatever you want to happen is inside the proper brackets. This can always lead to issues if it's not done properly. So that is using the if statement, and I don't know if you noticed, but we used one of our first comparison operators as well. So now we have the for in loop. So we had an array in this slideshow called workdays, and it had Monday through Friday, I believe, like something like this. And we're going to use our for in loop to actually go through each one of those days and do something. So, for example, we may want to print that day. Okay. One thing I need to explain, though, because where did we get day from? Day is something that we actually make up on our own. This is a constant right here. So imagine that you said let day, this would be day here. And day represents an element in the array. So for every single element in here, for every day, it's going to do whatever's inside of these brackets here. Okay, so let's see if I have an example of this. So essentially what's happening here, it's going to start the index of 0, and then it's going to print out that day. It's going to store whatever this index is in the property, the constant day, and then it's going to print that out, because that's what we're doing in this inside of the brackets here. And then it'll go around again and it'll do the next element in the array. It'll assign it to day, and then it will then once again print it out, and so on and so forth. So that's how for loops work. We have while loops. I'm actually going to show you that in code. So we also have a while loop. So a while loop is like this. So if we type the words while in, and by the way, Xcode is really great. It will try to give you a while loop, a generic one that you can fill out yourself. So if I were to hit return, it'll ask us for a condition and then to write some code in there. So pay really close attention here. While loop works really similar to the if statement. In the if statement, let me remove this. If I type if, Xcode wants to give us a generic if statement. If I hit return, it looks exactly the same as the while loop. We have a condition. If condition is true, then perform this task. Okay. In that regard, while this condition is true, perform this task. Okay. Common thing people like to do with a while loop is, since it has a tendency to go on forever, we can set a property here called counter. Let's go var counter. And we want this to change, so we'll give it a limit. I'll just say 5 times. And I'll go while counter is greater than or equal to 0, or while it's greater than 0, then perform this task in here. And I'm going to say for day in days of the week, if day is equal to Saturday. Then we will print, yay, it's the weekend. Don't forget, we actually need to make sure that our counter is going down. No, every time it goes through the loop, the while loop, I'll have it, the counter, set it equal to itself -1. There we go. Because we didn't complete that. Had to make sure to put that 0 there. And hopefully this fixes it, because it is going on and on and on. There we go. Cool. So like I may have mentioned, or may have not mentioned, while loops can be a little bit dangerous, because if you don't set a condition if you're not changing the condition and the condition always stays the same, then it's going to continue to run that. That is a memory leak. So while isn't a common thing that I've seen used, I haven't utilized it in day-to-day work as an iOS developer. So, but all the while, it wouldn't be good to leave that out. Like, while is such a popular thing to know, and you may get asked this question, so it's important to be able to answer. Or maybe you have a problem that can only be solved with a while loop. So it is important to know still. So it did happen, 5 times, right? Because we went through the loop 5 times. This while loop didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I did this to show you how everything is going to be building off of each other. This is such a small example, but and you know, you won't be doing such small things like this that often, but it's cool to see how all the different things that you learn, the properties, the loops, arrays, dictionaries, all those things are going to pile up and they're going to be building blocks for you to kind of play with. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. As well as we got to review a couple of things as well and learn a couple of things. So let's see. Dictionaries is something I still haven't shown you in code how to do. So I think I'm going to end this video with that. It is important to know how to write a dictionary. Dictionaries are super important. So I may have a dictionary. And you know, the style I have is explicitly saying what your property is going to be. So we might say that this is going to be a string. Oh, not a string. String colon int. Okay, and this will be, we set it equal to an empty to empty brackets here for now. You could start filling out some of these values here. You could say apartment. You could say Harold's apartment. And I'm going to make this up. There we go. And that's one element. That's one key value pair in this dictionary. And I can do another one here. I'm just going to copy and paste a lot of this. I'll just say this is going to be and this one's going to equal 130. Okay, so I just want to put two values in there. You could put as many values in as you want. This is how you structure a dictionary. You have a key value pair. They all have to be the same. Just like an array, all the objects or all the data types have to be the same in it. So like up here, we had an array of strings. In a dictionary, you have to have all the same key value pairs. So string is paired with an int. String is the key, int is the value stored in that key. So remember, in days of the week, we can access a certain element by putting a number in, and it'll give us in our gutter here whatever is in that index path inside of the array. So I put in number 2, it gave us Wednesday because 0, 1, 2, right? Okay. Now, what's different about a dictionary is that if I were to type in dictionary and open up the brackets, we would actually have to put in the string, for example. Whatever the key is going to give us that value. So we get 122 because at that key, we have 122. Usually your keys would be a lot simpler than that, ideally. And what you're going to notice way further down the line in a later tutorial, I'll show you how to grab data from a server. It's going to be really, really different. When we're grabbing that data, typically we're grabbing it as a dictionary or grabbing it as an array of dictionaries. So it'd be really important to have this principle down, and we'll bring it up a couple more times. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I know this one was a little bit shorter, possibly, hopefully. Should have been a little bit shorter. Wanted to go over dictionaries, wanted to go over loops, wanted to review arrays, take a little bit of a deeper dive, and reinforce the model view controller again. Once again, I really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, make sure to put them down in the comments section below, and let me know if you have any other questions about what we went over. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.